families, creating a lifetime of memories. Sadly, some families are denied these important moments due to the sad practice of alienation. These are families divided.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Families Divided TV. Reunification therapy will likely fail in the long run without treating the alienating parent. The best model for successful reunification therapy involves treating the alienated parent and children, as well as treating the alienating parent separately where there has been no intimate partner violence. The goal is to repair the family where possible so parents can normalize a parenting plan. Dr. Lindenberg believes reunification works best when both the alienated and alienated parents participate. He cites methods and outcomes from his own experience here tonight. We're going to be right back with Dr. Stephen Lindenberg right after this important message.
Divorce and co-parenting are a major life interruption for families, especially the kids, but also for parents and grandparents. And it's even worse in blame-filled, high-conflict cases. When parents engage in alienation by turning the kids against the other parent or grandparents, kids suffer. They're denied the opportunity to build the 4 big skills necessary for future resilience. New Ways for Families online class can help. Parents learn to use our popular BIF and EAR skills to calm the conflict and stop the hostile emails and texts. And we even have a class for kids and parents to learn together. Research shows a 75% improvement in joint parental decision-making after this course is taken, plus overall improvements for kids' well-being. Don't wait to make this affordable investment in your children's future and improve your well-being too. Start learning new ways for your family today at conflictplaybook.com.
Good morning. I hope you're all doing well. I'm presenting another video today related to reunification therapy and parent alienation, and I hope you will find it helpful in your journey toward recovering from the trauma to families from parent alienation, whether you've been a victim or whether you've been a family member. So today my presentation is centered on something that may sound counterintuitive, but it has to do with the importance of treating the alienating parent. Now, those of you who have been alienated or harmed by an alienating parent, please don't turn this off at this point. Hear me out a little bit, because we don't often find people talking about the importance of treating the alienating parent and helping them learn new skills wherever that's possible. But I want to talk about that a little bit to open your mind to see if you can see any wisdom in that goal of including the alienating parent in some fashion in treating the family. So the reason I think that this is important is that in my experience, the reunification therapy is likely to fail in the long run if we don't treat the alienating parent. That's just common sense. You don't need to be a PhD or a rocket scientist to figure out that the alienating parent has to be persuaded. They have no interest in resolving the conflict because they want the power and they weaponize the children against the targeted parent or the alienated parent. So we have to approach this with the idea that the alienating parent has a lot of issues that are unmet, unresolved, and to take that extreme step to weaponize a child. So even in the 3 to 4 day intensive training programs like Family Bridges, for instance, they involve treating the alienating parent. And they often will ask for a court order of a temporary 90-day order placing the children legally and physically in the custody of the alienated parent, because we find that, and again, it's just common sense. If you do treatment and you do intervention and you're sending the child right back home with the alienating parent, it's likely to undo or at the very least prolong the treatment. So let me talk to you about one important consideration. And that consideration is I will not, and most professionals will tell you the same thing. If there has been intimate partner violence or there have been a lot of PFAs that have been founded or any child abuse investigations that have been founded, that's where I draw the line about including the alienated parent in treatment. I will have to be really persuaded that this person has made tremendous progress in their own therapy and in their own self-awareness, growth, and healing to be able then to be a participant. And the goal for me of reunification therapy, of course, is to move toward the normalization of what most couples are able to achieve uh, when there's a prolonged divorce with children involved, which is to co-parent. We want the outcome to be healthy co-parenting. You know, the children need both parents and they need both parents to be highly functional. So before you can do that, you have to untangle the uh, the weeds, so to speak, of parent alienation and how it invades, um, for lack of a better metaphor, the garden of parenting. If you think of parenting as a gardening process where you're trying to grow your children and grow your family and eventually help them get to the point where they can live independently. So that's the goal of reunification therapy for me, is to get the parents to a point where they can either go out and start co-parenting again with the help of a co-parenting therapist, or parallel parenting if they just can't communicate at all, but they can stop alienating. So let me move on now to talk to you about recent research. So recently, Dr. Bill Burnett, and Alan Blotke, excuse me, is a hard word for me to say. They found in their research that the best model for successful reunification therapy involves the treatment of the alienated parent and the children, as well as treatment separately of the alienating parent. Now, you notice I said separately. So the alienating parent isn't brought into the scenario initially. The alienating parent has to be involved with his or her own therapist to get the skills, to acquire the skills and the insights to understand how this is not a productive behavior, how this is harmful to their children, so that even if they don't care for um, their ex-partner or the mother of their children or the father of their children, they still have children to raise. My way of looking at that view, and I might have said this to you before, is that when a marriage ends, it's like a company that's building a car shuts down and is no longer producing the car, but you still have to service the car. And in this case, you still have to grow and service and help the children until they reach maturity. So that's kind of the metaphor that I use for trying to do family therapy and trying to heal these broken systems. In my practice, I just want to tell you that I've had success in actually working with the alienated parent and the alienating parent. And these cases are exceptions rather than the rule, although I think they're worth looking at because they eventually, what I eventually do is I bring everybody together around the table. Like if I had a kitchen table, I would use it. And sometimes I've used a kitchen table, believe it or not, but most of the times it's in an office setting and you have a table that's a typical meeting table, and you group the members of the family around the table. Now, who should you have around that table? Think about that for a minute. Initially, you're not going to have the children in the room. You're going to have the adults in the room. And the people that you want in the room initially are um, the alienating parent and the alienated parent, to see if there's any wiggle room, to see if you can try to explore whether or not there are opportunities to have them find common ground. So it's sort of like mediation in a way. What is your goal here? What can we do? What's the best alternative negotiated agreement we can get if we can't get to the one that we want? So what I do is for when these I take an aggressive approach to reunification therapy. So I really read the riot act to the alienating parent, and I try to point out to the alienated parent what his or her role might be in keeping the uh, disagreement going, to keeping the argument going. And I found that in my treatment, so what we have to do is find out who else is at play in this alienation scenario. Now you're asking yourself, what do you mean? This is pretty simple. You got the alienator and you got the alienated. Well, it's not as simple as it appears. Oftentimes, what drives alienation is a new player in the family system. So that player could be the girlfriend of the alienating father, could be the boyfriend of the alienating mother, it could be a grandparent on one side or the other. It could be an aunt or an uncle or a sister or a brother. So first thing you have to do is look at the family system and determine who all the players are. So you probably, I don't know whether you've ever thought about this before. I want to give you the benefit of the doubt saying that you probably did. But my experience, I've been doing this for about 47 years, is that when I have a couple that can't move on and can't learn to co-parent together, there's often a new spouse or a new significant other that's added to the family mix that's the energy driving the alienation or driving the dysfunction. Oftentimes it's a mother or a step parent, mother or father, who thinks that they are a better parent than the birth parent. And so that has to do with the dynamic of trying to become the primary parent in place of the birth parent, if that makes sense. So the new parent, the new spouse, is threatened by the old spouse, and sometimes and oftentimes vice versa. And so where you might get an agreement without alienation, somebody is in the background saying, well, you can't let her get away with that. You can't let him get away with that. That's abuse. That's neglect. Oh, she's sending him to school in dirty clothes. Oh, he's not giving him enough lunch money. Those kinds of things that seem petty to most of us become magnified. They get under a magnifying lens and become expanded to become like life and death factors in family relationships. So hold that thought in mind. What we want to do is get everybody to stop weaponizing the children. So the court orders often only include the alienating parent and the alienated parent. They don't say that the step parent needs to participate or Grandma Smith needs to participate. Now I say the stepmother and the grandmother because oftentimes the fathers who are new to the relationship, the stepfather or a male grandparent, isn't I find that they're not the ones that are driving the alienation. And I not meaning to be sexist or I'm not misogynist, but I'm just telling you what the facts are as I observe them. That I don't often see um, male partners telling female partners not to give in to the former male partner when there's an alienation case going on. But it's not unusual to see a grandparent or another member of the family, female, driving the process here. Um, so let me go on and talk to you a little bit. I'm going to talk to you about a few cases. Um, I had a case involving a child that was alienated by their father from their mother. And it was an interesting case because um, I would get the father and the mother in the same room, and they would start to agree and start to move toward each other. But then I'd get the mother and the child in the room, and the child would be calling the mother all kinds of names, doing the stereotypical behaviors that you see in children that are alienated that you can identify, where they just come up with stories that are, not possible, and they come up with names for the parent, and you can hear them repeating what they've heard in their household about the alienated parent. So in this particular case, I was able to get the father and the stepmother in the same room. Um, and then I eventually brought in the father's significant other. And once I brought her in, I saw what the problem was. The problem was that she was really threatened by the birth mother because the father still talked to her and communicated with her most of the times in a civil manner until the until the new wife, the new spouse in the case, would find that out, and then she'd berate the father for not standing up for her, the stepmother. I hope you're following this. So what we have here is that the bond between the father and the stepmother is being threatened by the father's relationship with the birth mother. So it was just the father and the birth mother. I would have never seen this case. They would have worked it out. Complicating it even further was the fact that the stepmother in this case was majoring in psychology at a local college. So she would come back with psychological expertise, which was incomplete. So she had psychological knowledge without the expertise. She had the foundational psychology without the experiential psychology. And so every time father would go home and tell her what had happened, transpired in the session, she would agitate the father. And then she would tell the father, when you go in there, you take this into that doctor and you tell him this and you tell him that, and you tell the mother this and you tell the mother that. So after a while, I wasn't even working with the mother and the child anymore in the alienation. I was working with the father and the mother, and I could see that everything that I was trying to do was getting sandbagged at home by the stepmother. So eventually what I did is I said, well, rather than have her sniping and undermining the treatment, I'm going to bring her in. So I brought her in and I built a relationship with her, and I built a relationship. I brought the birth mother in. The three of them were working together. It started to go better. As soon as I brought the three of them together, then the two mothers started talking about things like, well, maybe we could try to break the ice a little bit here and do some birthday shopping for Johnny. I'm just making up a name there, and they started trying to do things and then together. But as soon as she sensed that the child was feeling closer to the mother again, she became threatened and she continued to undermine the process. So then eventually I brought in mother's significant other. So I had the four adults in the room together, and between them they began to communicate and act like socially responsible and family responsible parents and co-parents. And once we got to that point, the child stopped acting out at school. His grades improved at school. He was given more um, freedom on choosing his own schedule that suited him best for being with the parents. And all four of the parenting figures um, left my office co-parenting. Um, that case took about a year to get it done. And that's the course of these reunification therapies. They often take a year to 18 months because most of the time I don't, nor do the parents have the time in my schedule to see a couple weekly, every single week. And I don't find that that's very useful in reunification therapy anyhow, because I find that giving a couple of weeks in between for them to test out what they've learned in treatment is something that's helpful to the children, and that's my focus. My focus is the children. So let me move on to another case. This case was very interesting. Well, they're all because this family, the father and the mother had been high school sweethearts, and they married and they had three wonderful daughters. And the father and the mother started to have their problems. One of the problems with couples that get married who have been high school sweethearts is they don't grow together. If you know what I'm saying, is that you're an adolescent, you're 18, you fall in love. That's temporary insanity of falling in love. You know what that's all about. Get married, and then you become like 30 before you know it, and you've had two children, and your interests start to differ. You start to become an adult. You don't communicate as well together. The things that brought you together, now you find you don't feel the same way. You don't believe the same way. And then you look for somebody else to talk to. Um, if you're heterosexual, that's somebody of the opposite sex. That relationship often becomes a better friendship than your marriage, and it becomes intimate, and then well, you know the rest of the story. So they have these parents now were in their 40s, and the father had remarried and the mother had remarried, but they were um, the daughters were really confused because there were new children brought into the scenario by the remarriages. Particularly the mother's remarriage brought in three new siblings, and the children and the birth mother um, was being pushed by her husband, to assert herself more in trying to build a blended family with his children. And the birth father was pushing back, saying, "Wait a minute, I'm remarried. I have a new family. We have a baby. We want the daughters at our house." And they started fighting. And what happened is both of them were alienating the children against the other parent. So what eventually happened is that um, I was able to get the all four of the adults around the table, and I used some of my uh, family mediation techniques and tried to get them to identify what their goal was. I put up a little palette with had all these goals, all these brainstorming ideas, what they wanted to do for their children, and got them to focus on what the major issues were. And we focused on the goal, and then three issues, the three top issues. And after a while, whenever they go off track, then I would, of course, point to, okay, okay, folks, what is the goal here? And the goal is to take the stress off of the children by giving the children the freedom to travel between both families without feeling guilty about it. That's what was going on because of the kind of um, bilateral alienation. They were confused about their loyalties and felt awkward about asking to go to the other parent's house during the other parent's time. And now we're talking about these children being teenagers, so we're talking about 14 and 15-year-old kids. So after a few conjoint sessions, um, we finally came to a plan where mother and father had spent both at least $100,000 on lawyers and counselors and whatever. And I finally said, well, if we don't reach an agreement here, you can continue to spend your money fighting with each other in court. But if we could reach an agreement, you could start to put that money away for your children's education. And sometimes those suggestions work. These cases are so heated that oftentimes it doesn't matter what kind of reasonable solution the reunification therapist proposes. The people are so dug in on their positions and so dug in on being right that they can't see a different path. But eventually, mother, right in front of us, just took out a piece of paper and dropped all the charges that she had against father for contempt, forgave him about $8,000 in support that he owed her, and they started talking. The four couples started talking. The two moms started talking. The two moms started talking about how they could complement each other and instead of arguing with each other. And eventually, what happened um, is that they worked it out. The children were given more freedom in choosing where they would live and when they would be there. Um, and it actually had a happy ending. And you notice I'm only telling you the stories today that had a happy ending because a lot of them don't have happy endings. And I'm sure many of you watching here say, gee, he's off in la la land. I wish we could get that kind of settlement in our case. And I'm sorry that you're not having that settlement. But if you're working with a reunification therapist and you're not making progress in 6 to 8 sessions, it might be time to change therapists. You have to be careful that the therapist doesn't become part of the problem because the therapist doesn't really have the skills to, um, you know, separate out the issues and not become part of the problem instead of part of the solution. Anyway, the couple I just described to you, um, I haven't heard from them since, and that took about a year to 15 months. Um, so those are the cases. Those are two of the cases. I have a few minutes left. I just want to run through one more case that I had. Um, a father alienated his daughter from her mother in this case, and her new husband and his children. And it turned out that in this case, the father's mother had been very close to her former daughter-in-law to the degree that it was like the daughter-in-law was more like her own child instead of a daughter-in-law. And when the daughter-in-law broke up with her son, she became bereaved as though she had lost a child. It was she was angry at the loss of the relationship. And so she kept driving the father to seek primary legal and physical custody. She castigated the new husband, who she had never met, as somebody being evil because he was from a county that was more rural than the county that they lived in and less prosperous. And she didn't know what family he came from. So after I figured out what the problem was and what was holding things up here, I got the father, the mother, and the grandmother in the same room, got all the painful issues on the table, which is very important. It's important to get those issues on the table, even though they're painful and they're hard. They're difficult subjects. They have difficult discussions. You can't avoid them because if you avoid them, they fester underneath and threaten to undo everything you've tried to do. And it came out that the grandmother was grieving about the loss of their relationship. She and her daughter-in-law used to shop together, used to bake cookies together, used to talk about family matters and all that stuff. And the mother in this case, I tried to repair the relationship between the birth mother and the grandmother. And I had the birth father, meet the stepfather, and they actually one time went out for a beer together to get to know each other. The birth mother um, agreed with the grandmother and apologized and was sad for her loss. And they agreed to go for shopping for the child's school clothes each year and share birthdays and that sort of thing. That grandma would bake the birthday cake for the child each year, regardless of where the birthday was held. The alienation ended. The child stopped being uncooperative with his mother. He stopped calling her names. He started focusing in school, started doing better. The father and the stepfather didn't have they had a cordial relationship. They weren't best friends, but they had a lot in common. They were both mechanics, and so they could talk about cars and they could help each other out once in a while. So the family healed. They developed a family relation, more familial relationship, and more effective co-parenting. So to close up for today, I would say none of those cases would have resolved themselves had it not been for the inclusion of the alienating parent. And again, to remind you, it's not always a good thing to include the alienating parent, especially if the person has, has a serious drug problem, or has been incarcerated, or has been committed acts of domestic violence, child abuse, and that sort of thing. And you're only hearing from me about the cases that succeeded. Not every case succeeds, but I hope that this gives you a different view and a different perspective of the importance of including the alienating parent in the reunification treatment process. Hope you have a wonderful week and a good day.
On our next episode of Families Divided TV, Randy Fine speaks about the emotional toll of children proving their love to a narcissistic parent.